Hi, my name is Raphael Wong, and I'm a partner at Hilgo and Yip, and I'm joined by Jo and Megan in our series of interviews on adoption, titling "Different Colors, Same Love." Welcome, Jo and Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, tell me a little bit about your journey. Now, I understand that you two are not married, planning to get married, and then you have adopted a pair of siblings named Freddie and Luna. They are now 3 and 2 at the prime age of causing chaos at home.
Oh, yes.
That's understated.
So how long did it take before you two decided to go on to this adoption route?
Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to start a family through adoption. It was always something that I felt really, really passionate about. Growing up, my family in the UK have fostered, so I've always had foster children living with us, and that really shaped who I am today and how I wanted to start a family. And when I met Jo 7.5 years ago, one of our early conversations was about what our family wanted to look like and how we wanted to start a family. So when we decided that the time was right, we reached out to the social welfare department and began our very long adoption journey.
But how long did it take before you two jointly decided that, okay, it's time to make the application?
Before we were ready to adopt, we wanted to foster. And we reached out to Mother's Choice, which is one of the big organisations here. And we went through the process of becoming foster parents. It took about a year. And on the final interview, the home visit, when the social worker that we had at the time came to the house, she explained to us that it was actually really unlikely that we'd ever be matched with a child because we were a same-sex couple. We'd always be at the bottom of the pile. I had no idea.
Did they explain why that's the case?
They said, what was their exact reasoning?
I think just at the time that was sort of where they were at with it, and just said, you know, I think they were trying to almost give us a sense of reality that this could take longer than, I guess, normal. So for us, it was obviously another conversation for us to have as to, okay, we feel passionate about a family. And at that time, we wanted to foster as well, because we, as Megan said, we felt really strongly about trying to help children that needed help and, you know, start our own journey. And we always wanted to adopt eventually. But yeah, as we realised that wasn't going to be an option, we then went into the adoption process.
It was about a year, maybe a year and a half before we started the adoption process. I think that conversation in our dining room with that social worker was huge for me, and like a real block in the road, so to speak. And I hadn't realised the prejudice or the discrimination or how hard it would be to start a family at that point in Hong Kong. I'd never faced anything like that before, so that was really eye-opening. And so we did go into the adoption process.
Before that, I think it's interesting how you said to start the family. So it might be right to say that in your concept of having a family, kids are very crucial to this formula. Like in order to have a family, you have to have kids.
We actually have 2 wonderful dogs at home, and we were very happy.
More obedient.
We were very happy dog mums for a while, but we both want a big family, or wanted a big family. A big family. You still want 4 kids, don't you?
Yeah, we've
Checo is a good place for that.
Don't encourage her. No, we, you know, as Megan said, very early on in our relationship, we discussed what makes a family. And for us, that was to have children. And obviously, you know, then we went through the process that we did.
And you mentioned fostering and adoption. At any point in time, if you ever considered surrogacy, was it important to have this biological link?
No, I think for us, again, as I said, we felt we could actually almost give back. That we felt that there were a lot of children that needed some parents and needed a home, and we just felt this was the right thing to do. There's so many children that need to be adopted, and we could give them that gift. And as it turns out, they've given us the gift. That we just felt that this was the right thing for us at this moment in time.
You also mentioned that it was a very long process, which I've learned. Can you
How long
tell
have
us?
you got?
As many time as you need.
I'm a very type A person and have a full chronological order of every phone call, email, meeting that we had with the social welfare department. At the time, I was working at a school in Causeway Bay, and a good friend of mine had just gone through the adoption process, and she had told me it took us about 6 to 9 months. They are a heterosexual married couple. Very smooth and easy process for them. So whilst I did go into the process, we did go into the process with our eyes open to some of the barriers that might come in place as a same-sex couple. I don't think we had any idea quite how challenging,
was the social welfare department
times.
helpful or friendly in the whole process?
Yeah. So we've had a mix of social workers and a mix of experiences, I think is fair to say, but they were always honest, if nothing else, sometimes painfully so. We started the process. The first phone call was on June the 16th, 2021. And Freddie and Luna came home on the 14th of February, 2024. So it was almost 3 years. Obviously, COVID was in that. It took us quite a long time to go through the initial process. When we went for our first intake meeting, we walked through the door, we had to sign in, and there was the female adopter and the male adopter, and we couldn't put both our names in the female adoption column. They said, actually, only one of you is going to be able to do this because there isn't space literally on the form. I was thinking, oh, crikey, maybe this is going to be slightly more challenging than we thought. But we were welcomed warmly into those meetings. We did a couple of those meetings. We got assigned to a social worker, and they asked us to think about which one of us was going to be the legal parent. That was really challenging and quite upsetting that it wasn't quite the roses and rainbows that we thought it was going to be.
So who made the final call?
We made the final call together. Currently, I was the legal parent on the forms.
Is there any special consideration or tips from the social worker as to who to choose?
Not really. I think for us, it didn't really matter because we were both going to be the parents, but that was just a case of going through the process, which, from the start, we knew, as Megan said, was going to be arduous, and we respected the process every step of the way. And a lot of the time, the social welfare department were pretty honest with us, as you say, and, every step it felt there's another barrier or
another
a hurdle.
roadblock.
And it was tough. It was really challenging to kind of keep positive that this was ever going to happen. And we kind of thought it wasn't going to happen after a period of, 2.5 years. And we started to lose a bit of faith and a bit of hope in the system, and started to potentially think, okay, well, if this isn't meant to be, then we'll move on. And of course, that's when the phone call came.
I was told that it took quite a while before you were matched, and you had to change the criteria before you were matched. Is that right?
It took us 2 years from getting approved to the date of being matched. It was, I think, something like 26 matching panels, 26 third Thursdays of the month, like desperately staring at our phones, waiting for them to ring. And those days were horrendous. And they started off with such hope and forced positivity and really thinking, this is going to be it. We're going to get the phone call. Today is the day. I feel emotional thinking about it because it was so difficult. And then just as the hours passed, just becoming more and more hopeless, and like clinging on, thinking, oh, we knew that they were going to call probably by 4 o'clock, but then we're thinking, oh, maybe they're just going to call late, and then it would finally get to 6:30, and then realizing, okay, it's a 3 more week wait. It's, you know, let's see what happens at the next matching panel. We have an absolutely amazing community and a really strong relationship, but, you know, it was really testing at times, and it was really upsetting, and just questioning whether you were good enough, if, you know, that what the problems could be. Like, should we have said something different in our forms, or should we have supplied more evidence? And my goodness, against what our straight friends had to produce in terms of evidence to show that we were responsible and suitable candidates, we produced books and books and books of evidence, references from anybody that we could, you know, anybody that we were close with. And they said, you know, maybe getting references from males would help when it came to show that there were strong male figures in their life, because they deemed that was necessary. And so we got lots of men that we knew to write: my dad, your dad, my brother, my stepdad, you know, a friend who Jo swims with. A lot of evidence. Jo went on a parenting course, and we jumped through every hoop and some. But yeah, we still came back to questioning, oh, maybe we should have got one more reference, or maybe we should have done this. I remember really vividly, we were back in the UK for the summer, and we were staying at a house in Bigbury, and we'd gone for a walk. And I remember really clearly being on the beach, and it was a Thursday. And we were just waiting for the phone call. And I remember that being a really, really upsetting time, because we were quite deep into the process then. And of course, you're so emotionally invested. When we first got approved, we thought it'll be, you know, 1, 2 or 3 matching panels. And that's what it had been for our friends. And we were so excited. And everyone told us, don't go and buy things. But we were so excited. We bought the cot, we bought clothes, we bought all the like bougie silicone children's eating things.
That was very much at the start, wasn't it? And as time went on, we started to lose a bit of faith and a bit of hope, and that's when we started to reach out to a few people to have conversations and to see if anybody else was going through a similar experience, because it's a really lonely and isolating experience. Just to no news is bad news in this case. And we actually met with the social welfare department a couple of months before we were matched, about 3 months before we matched, and we just wanted to sort of have a conversation about, you know, realistically, where are we? In these matching panel meetings, where do we sit? Because if we are not actually being considered, please just put us out of our pain. Because you put your life on hold, you know, you wait for that call. And when it doesn't come, it's hard, you know? And so we were like, is this actually going to happen? Is this, like, just don't sell us a pipe dream, because we'll move on, or we'll give everything we can and we'll keep the faith. So we had a meeting, and they said to us, would you be open to siblings? And we kind of looked at you and said, yeah, sure. And we thought, and as I say, at that point, we thought it's not going to happen. And I mean, we always, as Megan said, we always wanted a bigger family. So we ticked the siblings box and had a conversation about a few other areas. And then literally 2 months later, our dream came true. And that was the day that changed our life.
Do you still remember that day?
Oh, vividly. and ironically, I was actually working at home that day, and I was about to take Megan out. We were going to meet for dinner. And because we'd got to the point where it was like, can we put our life on hold anymore? This has been 3 years of heartbreak. And that's not to sound dramatic, but, you know, starting a family is such a huge emotional investment. That we wanted. Like, we were up for the challenge, but we were meeting that night, and I just happened to be working from home, and I thought, I'll just check my email before I leave. And the email was always going to go to Megan, or the phone call. And I just come off a Zoom call, and I opened my laptop, and I thought, I'll just have a look. And I had a message, and I couldn't even read it properly, that said matched siblings. So I just skim read the email, and I went, oh my God, we've been matched. And I was like, I read a boy first, and then I was like, oh, and a girl. And it was I just went into this kind of state of shock and euphoria. And I rang Megan. And it was when she had an Apple Watch, and of course you can answer the phone on an Apple Watch, of course you can. And she was at school teaching. And I rang her and she went, and it was around 4:00. So it was around the time that, you know, we just made a deal that we don't ring each other on a Thursday, because when the phone rings, your heart starts going. And she said, she answered it on a, what are you doing calling me? Don't call me, it's a Thursday. And I was like, no, babe, we've been matched. And she was like, what? And just broke down, just absolutely broke down. And she was like, oh my goodness. And I went, no, listen to me. That's not all. There's two. She was just, and it was just after then, it was just this series of disbelief, of shock, of happiness, of elation. And just, I mean, needless to say, I ran out the house and I couldn't even tie my shoelace up. I fell over my trainer kind of thing, drove at 100 miles an hour type thing. We met at the office in North Point and we just went in shaking. And they literally gave you a blue folder and a pink folder. And, you know, the details of the children, and obviously you don't get to see a photo of them. And
you can see body parts, I heard, like photos of some specific body parts.
We just had a description, but to be honest, we didn't need anything else. We knew that was it. That was our dream, and it'd come true. And we went home. And I just went into complete panic. And I was like, right, well, the first thing we need to do is clear out the kitchen cupboards. So that was my way of thinking.
So irrational.
But no, the next, you know, after that, you go through the process of meeting the children. But I have to say that the social welfare, the people that we'd been assigned to were just so delighted for us, because they saw the pain that we'd been through.
The dedication.
We'd
quite
been
visibly,
been in
hysterical crying at some points in the office, and we'd known these people for 2.5 years at this point, and they've been part of our journey too. And yeah, they were really, really emotional and really happy. And I think what's worth noting in all of this is it was never them who, I feel that we were discriminated against, but it was never them who discriminated against us. It was the system that discriminated against us. These were people who saw us for who we are, which is two loving parents, and they knew that we would be good and responsible parents, and that there was a child or children out there to complete our family. And it was never them, it was the system, and they were so happy and overjoyed. And when we took Freddie and Luna into the office, the whole office was up on their feet and they were so delighted. Yeah, there were some really fantastic people at the social welfare department.
But I heard that there are still some hiccups during the court process.
Hiccups.
You could say that.
Yes.
Well, we thought the matching process was difficult, but what was to come was far worse. And obviously you get matched, you go through that, and then 3 weeks later you meet the children. And actually a special part of our journey was that our children had never met each other. So they're biological brother and sister, and they'd never met each other. So they, it was just so beautiful. And so once the children come home, you have a monthly visit. And so you feel like you're being assessed all the time. And quite rightly, you have a monthly visit because it's the children's welfare that is the paramount in their safety. And as time was coming on, it was like, okay, we're going to get our court date. And I just had this sort of 10% of me that couldn't celebrate the court date coming up because I was just so worried that something might happen. And we thought it was going to be irrational, but unfortunately our worst nightmare came true.
We got a phone call. The court date was on Wednesday, and we got a phone call on Monday at 5:00 from our social worker saying that they had I'm not a lawyer, so I don't speak law speak, but they'd had a note from the judge that they wanted to postpone, I think postpone is the right word, postpone the court hearing, and they'd sent through a note which had basically said that could we prove that
it's in the best interest of the kids?
Yeah, it's in the best interest of the children for them to be in a same-sex parent family, and how could we prove that our sexuality wouldn't negatively impact the development of the children? Yeah,
that was a tough day.
It felt like somebody had died. I think that's the only way to describe the feelings of those that day.
We just didn't know what to think. We'd spent 6 months as a family, you know, and at that point, we'd bonded, we'd fallen in love with these children. We had a family, everything, and then, you know, you don't know if that's going to continue or not. And that becomes more than just a fear or worry. That is your whole heart just sinking. And you just go, what's going to happen next week? And what's going to happen the week after that? And unfortunately, the information we were getting was, we don't know what's going to happen, when the next hearing might be, you know. And so we're frantically trying to gather further information, you know, references again from medical professions, lawyers, you know, all these things we were just trying to do to desperately prove that we would raise our children. And we didn't sleep, you know, you just don't, we were just in a daze, weren't we? Just thinking, what's going to happen? And it was so unsettling, and, you know, just not knowing and not having a timeline as well was difficult. Yes. You know, and then
we got a court date for the 18th of December. And yeah, we were so apprehensive leading up to it. We got the court date on the 22nd. We got a note on the 22nd of October saying that our court date was the 18th of December. Yeah, so before the first court date had been postponed, I was 100% sure. When was
the adjournment of the first court date?
3rd of September. I was 100% sure that we'd be fine.
Almost a year.
No,
September, 3 months.
3 months.
Waited for 3 months.
Mm-hmm. It felt like years. It really did.
Did the social worker update you from time to time?
She didn't have much information to update us on.
She did what she could.
She did what she could. She came for her monthly visit. She answered the emails and the phone calls. You know, but she didn't know. So she couldn't reassure us because she didn't know what was going to happen.
And did you seek any legal help at that time?
We spoke to some lawyers, a barrister, and we were advised not to go down the legal path, not to provoke or anger the judge, to just say like, yes, sir, okay, sir, whatever you want us to do, sir. We submitted quite a lot of information, just basically trying to, in the nicest possible way, just saying, this is why we're fantastic parents. And we sent photos, and we sent something like a 6-page report on, I'm a teacher, on like the children's development, like marked from when they arrived to where they were now, just showing that they were making these like huge developmental leaps, like Freddie's speech therapy and how much his speech was coming on. We'd submitted as much information as we could, and then we waited and waited, found out the court date, and then went to court as our family of 4 with our social worker on the 18th of December.
Was it an exciting moment, or did you expect any more further hiccups at that time?
In my mind, I'd prepared all these things to say to the judge about all the hurt and pain that he'd put us through and why had he done this to us. And I just got there and it all just completely went from my mind, and we just...
Well, it wasn't important anymore.
It wasn't important anymore. The important thing was getting the adoption order through and getting the legal part to what we already knew, that we were a family. And the judge was really lovely. And he, although there's one legal parent, he acknowledged Jo the whole way through the court proceedings. And he spoke about us as a family of 4 and about how he knew that we were both capable parents. And, you know, he was telling the kids, call me uncle. And, you know, he was lovely. And again, with the social workers, like I don't think he was ever at fault. I think it was the system that was at fault that discriminated against us.
It was a very emotional day for us, and when we were in the court, I think he was doing his best to reassure us. And when we got to the court, you still don't know if it's actually going to happen. And everybody said, "Don't worry, if you get to court, it's happening." And me, again, I was like, "Absolutely not. I don't believe." I'm like, preparing myself to protect Megan, protect the kids, and us as a unit. And we got in that courtroom, as Megan said, and the judge, I think, did a great job of trying to make it as respectful as he could, and was very engaging. And Megan, usually I thought Megan would be in tears, but I was just a blubbering mess the whole time. And it was a huge emotion. And all of us, I can't, like that was just like, when we got the call to say we'd been matched, that was joy and elation. This was just relief. This was just a feeling of, it's going to be okay. And that was the first time we had felt it's going to be okay, was the 18th of December 2024, when we started the process in 21. And that's a long time to be living in this unknown, anxious. And it just felt so unfair, because it felt that we met the criteria.
Yes.
We were two loving people that wanted to have a family and to share our love and provide a home for children. And it just felt so unfair. And even like on calls to our family, they were like, "Oh, once they see the kids at your home, they'll realise that, they're not going to take the kids away from you." And you just don't realise it's that wasn't, it was the process. And as Megan said, unfortunately, the constraints and the additional things that we felt we had to go through was really unjust. But from that moment on, we then lived in a state of, okay, is this really happening? Because you go from monthly checks and all this regular kind of, thorough due diligence that it should be when somebody's adopting. We questioned what we had to go through for the sake of going through it as a same-sex couple. There were clearly things that we had to do that was inappropriate. But the due diligence on the safety and the welfare of the children, as I said before, we absolutely respect that system. But afterwards, after the court date, we were like, okay, so, and Megan was like, that's it, it's over. And I was like, yeah, so do we have to tell them if there's like an emergency or if we're going to leave the country? And Meg's like, no, there are children. And I just couldn't, it wasn't actually until we left the country with the children.
To apply for passport.
And you're going through and you're like, it's almost as if we're smuggling something through, customs. And you go through and I'm like literally sweating, palms sweating. I'm going, you've got the passports, you've got their ID, you've got the letter that explains who we are, you've got the birth certificates and all this stuff. And we just walked through immigration on our first holiday. And it was like, that for me was the moment I was like, this is real. This is true. That's our family. And there are children and we don't have to report to anybody else. But that took a long time to sink in, especially for me, to be going, is this happening? And to really believe it. Because you start to doubt the system.
Right. What last name do they have? Because in the adoption process, you get to choose their
So
name.
they have my English last name, and then their Chinese name has Jo's last name, her Chinese last name. When we get married in the summer, we will go legally married. We'll have a double barrel last name, and then are going to go through We've currently applied for British citizenship. And once that comes through, Jo will legally adopt the children in the UK, and then they will take both of our last names.
The poor kids are going to have the longest names ever.
I see. So the kids are fully settled in at Sheko, a very lovely place. Do you think that because you two obviously came from UK and then the kids were local Chinese, or region at least, do you feel any sense of awkwardness from coming from the neighbor, seeing that the four of you walking together?
Quite the opposite. Sheko community, I think, is a really, really special place in Hong Kong. And from the moment that we took the first steps in the adoption process, everybody that we knew in Sheko or know in Sheko has really been behind us. We walk the dogs in the morning, people are asking, how's it going? Have you had a match yet? Have you had this? Have you had that? And when the children did come home, the Sheko community really rallied around to make it as a seamless transition as possible. Some friends in the village who have also adopted bought us hot meals 3 times a day for 2 weeks to make sure that we were all eating well. A similar thing that you do if your friend has a newborn baby and you take over a big pat, a lasagna or such. They were super supportive. When we found out that we were bringing siblings home, obviously the matching process was super long. We'd actually got rid of loads of the stuff that we'd initially bought as we became more despondent. And there's a big WhatsApp group in Sheko, and everybody that lives there's on it. And, can I borrow some sugar? There's no shops around or anything. We put a message out saying, we've got the news that we've, dreamt of. We've got 2 siblings coming home. They're 2 and 1 years old. We've got nothing that we need. And before we knew it, we had a spreadsheet that had become, this is everything you need. People were going on it and ticking off things that they had for us. Prams arrived, cribs arrived, more clothes than I have ever seen in my life arrived. Everyone really rallied around us. And when the children came home, everyone was really respectful of the settling in process. Yeah. We sort of hunkered down for 6 weeks, didn't we? And we left the house, of course, and we were around Sheko, but it was really about us building that bond and that connection with the children. Everyone was really respectful of, saying hello, but not trying to come and overwhelm the children, because it's a hugely overwhelming thing to happen for the children as well as for us.
It really restored our faith in humanity. And to your question about the kids are obviously Hong Kong Chinese and we're from the UK, we actually found that in the village, obviously there's a big expat community and a local community, and then sort of 2nd, 3rd generation families that have, been in Sheko all their lives. And when we sort of started walking around with our children, we actually found the local community just to be so really heartfelt, interested, and we had many examples where more elderly local people come up and thank us for adopting these children.
Helping Hong Kong.
And we couldn't believe that. And, we've actually found that through Freddie and Luna, we've got a new community, not only with the other families, but also with the local community. It's almost like we've been a little bit more accepted into that side of the community.
I think a wonderful example is there's this wonderful old lady who sits on the corner by the temple, and she always has her front door open, and she's always sat in her chair watching TV with her auntie next to her. And, before we'd always walk past and say hello before we had the children, and you'd maybe get there. But now, the kids love her. We walk past every day and they're like, hi, Popo, hi, Popo. And they go up to the door.
They also demand
slightly
crackers.
more embarrassingly. They now know that she's a bit of a soft touch. And
they've got a hidden agenda.
And they're putting their hands over, they're going inside. And now that they've started to be given Ferrero Rocher, well, there's no stopping them. But it's, there's such a community.
It is. And to our desire, it's a multicultural community, and that's where we want our children to be brought up, acknowledging families that look different, acknowledging families that have 2 mums or 2 dads or of different colour. And I think we mentioned before, but the community really comes together, and every Friday they do what's called Fun Friday. So each Friday somebody else hosts it, and it was our turn last week, and all the aunties come together. Parents are taken out of the house and banned from the house for 3 hours. And basically they come together, they cook food from, different parts of the world. So it could be Asian food, Western, and they come together and somehow it just works, where they're cooking pizzas and, noodles at the same time. And all the kids then get in the bath. So 2 by 2, they all go through the bath, they all put the pajamas on, then they watch a movie together for an hour. And it's the most humbling thing to see just so many children of different walks of life in the same room, wearing their pajamas, watching a cartoon. And we just feel really blessed that our children are able to experience in such early years different blended families that they might not in other parts of the world.
And the fact that the community is so welcoming, this is fascinating.
Absolutely, because, for a start, we're lesbians, we're in a same-sex couple. And, we hope one day you won't even have to say that, But unfortunately, that's where we're at. So in Sheco, there's obviously a lot of tradition, as I say. And, so for Megan and I, firstly, to be a couple there, there's not too many other same-sex couples that live in the village. And so, we've been accepted, as it were, in that space. And then to come back with 2 children, 2 Chinese children is huge. And, you should never feel that you have to be accepted, but that's where we're at. That's where we're at in this day and age, that you still need acceptance, or you want acceptance, and we feel accepted. We do get the odd stare, not in Sheco, but you walk down the road with the kids and holding hands, and they're trying to kind of work out what's going on.
We've had a lot of questions. You're playing that down a little.
Yeah, we have. We have had a lot of questions.
When we are out as a family of 4 together,
outside of
Sheco, there's a lot of looking, sometimes pointing, questions are asked, which, they wouldn't be asking a straight couple these questions, and I find that really difficult, because I just think, just let me crack on the way that you are. But we always try to be respectful, and if it's an appropriate time, it's it's a learning moment for those people as much as it is for us. But when it's not the correct time, I'm very happy to just politely and respectfully.
So Freddie and Luna, they speak, when you first took them in, do they speak Cantonese?
Yes.
Mostly?
Yeah, so they were from Cantonese foster homes who spoke almost
Cantonese?
Yeah.
Exclusively.
So that was a real crash course in Cantonese for us when they came home, with some basic commands, Shodai, Gole, these types of things. I am subsequently learning Cantonese, and Joe's just about to start learning. What a tricky language. My goodness, the tones are killing me, but we're really giving it our best shot, because we want the children to grow up in the culture that they were born. They are Hong Kong Chinese children. They will speak Cantonese fluently. They're going to go to a Cantonese speaking kindergarten from August.
Oh, where's the nearby kindergarten?
Heng Fa Chun.
Oh.
It's a little way away. But everything is from Sheco.
Interestingly, Freddie was non-verbal when we got him.
When he came home, and he'd only ever heard Cantonese, obviously, as Megan said. So, and Luna was 13 months, so she was sort of making noises, but she quickly learned to speak. But you just underestimate how amazing children are and their adaptability. They'd probably never even heard English speaking and Western people, and then to start developing and to start understanding and learning. But we had to work out how to communicate with them at first, and we used baby sign language. As Megan said, we learned the odd word badly in Cantonese. But it's been such a journey just watching them blossom, and in particular our son Freddie, who over the last couple of months has just suddenly started to really understand what you say, because you could say something in English and
you could say chair, and they have no reference point to what that means. So there was that, like, it was so multi-layered as to what we had to do to kind of bond and to form a relationship. But I actually think that made it stronger for us, because we had to find different ways of communicating. And ultimately, through acts of kindness and through being together, we started to kind of form that bond. And now we can't stop them speaking, especially at 8:00 at night when they're in their cots chatting to each other, and they share a bedroom. And we love that, because we just think that they've got each other. It's less amusing at 3 a.m. mind when they're having a dance party, chuckling away.
Let's backtrack a bit and talk about support from the workspace. Now, if it is a newborn baby, then you have a maternity leave and paternity leave. But what happens to adoption? Do you get the same level of treatment?
It's a very interesting question. Before moving to ESF, which is my current employer, I worked for another school in Hong Kong, and that was when Jo and I first ventured down the journey of adoption. And after we'd been matched, I went to go and see my school principal, and I was really excited, and I was asking, what's your adoption leave policy? Only to be met with that they didn't actually have one, and it turned into quite a big fight that spanned over the course of time. Me fighting for my right to have leave to be at home with the children, and her saying word for word, but you aren't having a real family. These won't be your real children. That was a huge turning point for me, and I just thought, even if they offered me 100 weeks paid leave, I can't stay working for an employer who doesn't believe that the way I want to start a family is real. I left work in floods of tears that day and went home to Jo, and we were both very much in alignment that I couldn't continue to work for a company that didn't see me for who I authentically was and didn't value how I would start a family or how we were going to start a family. I had an interview for Bradbury ESF with my wonderful principal. And in this first interview, I explained why I was leaving my old employer, and she said, we have an adoption policy at ESF. This isn't the first time that somebody's adopted. You get 14 weeks paid leave, the same as you would for maternity leave. We are fully supportive of how people choose to start their families. I thought, wow, this is what every employer needs to be like. So I subsequently...
I need to check if we have adoption leave policy.
So I subsequently started working at Bradbury School, which is just the most wonderful, inclusive community. And, some time later we got matched with the children, and my principal was one of the first people to give me a huge hug. She was in tears. Everybody around me was in tears. I was in tears. We were all just so happy. It was the Thursday that we got the news. And I came into school a week later, and she had made teddy bears with the children's name on them. Everybody was so excited, so warm, so welcoming. And 14 weeks paid leave, starting from the date that the children came home. And I wasn't ready to go back to work when the 14 weeks came to an end, and she actually allowed me some extra time to extend my adoption leave for a few more weeks so that I could be at home with the children. And I'm not the first person at ESF to adopt, and I won't be the last. And I have only heard really positive things about the ESF community and how wonderfully supportive they are.
At the time I was working for Hong Kong Rugby. And this was a new kind of, it was new basically in the organisation, and they were extremely similar to Megan. They were, at the time, the CEO was just so supportive, and all my team were, and, it wasn't even a question. It was a case of, because we weren't sure, do I get paternity? Do I get adoption? Do we, and straight away it was like, okay, yeah, this is what you're eligible to have. And it was that 14-week piece. And not only did they give us that time, they let us be fairly flexible with that as well. And just the support from that community. And we just couldn't face another roadblock. You know, I'll never underestimate the impact of both our employers basically saying, we're with you. What do you need? Here's some flexibility within the system, which we hadn't had from anywhere leading up to that. And that was the most valuable time for us to be a family together and to take that initial period off. I then went back to work and Megan stayed at home, and then we sort of swapped over. So I had another bit of time off as well. So, but the transition then was hard, you know, from being at home to then going, okay, we both go back to working full time. How does that work? How does that work for the children? And that transition in itself, that's when our support was really needed from our employers in terms of just that understanding and expectation around being a mum, being in a senior position as a teacher, as a leader, whatever that might be, and just managing those expectations around that and what support we needed. And we will always be forever grateful to both of our employers for that.
I wanted to ask this rather sensitive questions. As you said at the beginning, that during the adoption process, you can feel the discrimination because of the time, or if I put it the other way, if you were a heterosexual couple, chances are you don't have to wait for 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. And what's your view on that?
Well, I think it's wrong. I think that why are we being discriminated against, or other same-sex couples being discriminated against based on who we love? I've not chosen to be bisexual. Joe's not chosen to be gay. It's who you are born that way. Why is it harder for me to start a family? Indeed.
I think you just showcase the real life example and prove the system wrong in the sense that you are perfectly capable of raising a healthy and happy family with love.
And I think, you know, it was a first. I'm not sure it was a first, but it's a new concept for the system to understand. And obviously, from our kind of experience, that discrimination was very evident, and it almost got to the point where it was like, this is pretty obvious now. But I truly believe that out of all of this, one thing I'm really proud of is that I feel like we are hopefully paving the way for others to have the courage to do it, because we didn't know any other gay couple that were going through the system and the process until towards the end, where we became good friends with them.
And it was after that judgment that
absolutely that we were then able to continue with some confidence. But we were kind of like the first going through it, and it was just so unknown.
And the social workers also
didn't know.
They had no point of reference. They had no way of telling us whether it was going to be okay or it wasn't okay. They did the best that they could with the rules they were given and with what they were told to follow. But there was clear discrimination throughout the whole process, and it didn't take the same amount of time for any of our heterosexual friends, married or unmarried, to adopt, to be matched suitably with a child or children.
But I guess one thing that we will say is that we're really proud to be part of the change that is starting to come and hopefully will continue to come here in Hong Kong. This is our home. We consider it our home, having been here for 10 years. And we want to be part of that change movement because there's so many potential loving parents out there.
I've had so many people contact us, so many same-sex couples now that know of our story, and we're part of the Adoptive Families Hong Kong group, and through that we've been passed on the number of some same-sex couples who have also wanted to adopt but were scared to do so, or they'd heard about how hard our journey had been, and they were, I guess, looking for some reassurance or for somebody to say it will be okay. These people have contacted us at various points of our journey, so you can imagine our answers have been different throughout. You know, there was a female couple that contacted us before the court date, and we just said, this is the hardest thing that we've ever done. Be really prepared if this is the route that you want to go down. But we speak to people post-court date, and, you know, we have the most amazing children. Our dreams have come true. You know, my heart is just so full of joy and love that looking back today on everything that we've just spoken about, it's really, I'd forgotten all of that because it seems so irrelevant now that we have just the most perfect family with the most wonderful children. And my mum sent me our kids' birthdays against the matching dates and just said, if you'd have been matched in the first 2 or 3, like your heterosexual couple friends have, then like Freddie wouldn't have been born or Luna wouldn't have been born. And like it was 16 matching panels before they were both born or like ready to be adopted, because there's a lot of paperwork that has to be done. And so I do think the universe worked in a very heartbreaking way, and you know, it felt tragic at times, but also we wouldn't be with the children that we have in the family that we have if it had all happened.
It feels like the struggle makes the bonding stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But ultimately, there's no excuse for that.
No, there isn't.
You know, ultimately, there's no excuse for this discrimination in the 21st century. There's also, it's not founded on any proof. And that's the thing, like when we got the memorandum from the judge that the court case had been delayed, when we went to go and see lawyers, they were saying it's not founded on any proof. Like they've got papers from London, from China, saying there's absolutely no developmental impact on children who are in a same-sex family or a heterosexual family. There is no proof. It's completely unfounded. We've got put through all this heartbreak, all this tragedy, all this sadness, all this discrimination, and there's no proof or evidence as to why. But I just hope that, you know, people hear our story and stories like this, and we want, like, what I was going to say is we're really proud to hopefully be able to support other potential families to go through this and to give them that reassurance. I'll never forget when we were in the process, we met a couple and one of them just turned around and said, it just won't happen in Hong Kong. Unfortunately, the same-sex couple, I just don't think it'll happen. And at the time I was like, okay, that's your experience, but that always stayed with me. But I just hope we don't have to say that anymore. I hope that we can say it can happen. And, you know, I think time will tell over the next 12, 24, 36 months as to how many more same-sex couples are successful in this journey.
And don't have to go through the hard part after the match, after bringing the children home and into the family. Hopefully
with the
court, that will be more seamless now, and that hopefully won't happen to anybody else. I wouldn't wish it on anybody else.
That's a very good summary. You did my job for me.
There you go.
Thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you for having us.